All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video with training camp getting ready to start in a few weeks. Who is the 49ers' number one competition inside the NFC West? We break it all down coming up next. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in both spots from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket. Tell them the Krug sent you. And this video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code KRUG, K-R-U-E-G, and they will match you up to your first $100. All right, who is the number one competitor to the 49ers inside the NFC West? Well, I think all these teams are, getting better. That's the one thing. I think you can make an argument that Arizona, the Rams, and the Seahawks are all getting better. So that's always a concern. Let's start with Arizona. Arizona's an interesting team. Why? Because I really like their combination of Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon. Now, I didn't know tons about Ossenfort, but I like what he's doing as a general manager. I love the draft he just had. I like some of the moves he's made. And then Gannon, I thought really was impressive this year as a first-year head coach. I mean, Arizona's a losing culture. They didn't quit. They played hard all year long. Didn't have Kyler early on. Didn't seem like it mattered. They battled in a lot of games. They played hard. They were not an easy out for anybody. So to me, Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon have some momentum going as a combination general manager head coach. Now, let's take a look at the Cardinals and what they are. They're a team that has some real improving players. A lot of it's about how good can Kyler become. He was their first round pick in the 2019 draft. He's backed up by Desmond Ridder this year, who comes over from Atlanta, and Clayton Tune. So they have some depth at quarterback. They've got a couple good running backs. They got James Conner, and they just drafted Trey Benson from Florida State, who's big and fast. They also picked up DJ Dallas from Seattle. They have the former Jet, Michael Carter, Amari Dermacado. They've got some backs. They got a really good tight end in Trey McBride, and they got the best blocking tight end in the draft in Tip Ryman. They also have a real speedster tight end in Elijah Higgins, the former Stanford Cardinal who went to Miami, and then the Arizona Cardinals picked him off Miami's practice squad. That was a smart pickup. And Higgins can really run. And then you look at that offensive line. They bring in Jonah Williams to play right tackle. They've got Will Hernandez, who's as broad as almost any guard in football at right guard. You got Paris Johnson, who's a blue chipper at left tackle. And then they added Christian Jones from the University of Texas. Isaiah Adams is a good, developmental offensive lineman. So they've got some decent offensive line talent there. And I think Paris Johnson is one of the best young left tackles in the game. Receiver-wise, they added Marvin Harrison Jr. to Michael Wilson. They brought in Zay Jones. They still have Greg Dortch. So there's it's not like the cupboard's bare at wide receiver. They've got some pretty good receivers there with size. And then defensively, they drafted Darius Robinson on their front line. So, from the University of Missouri. Their defensive line's a little bit of a work in progress. It's a 3-4 defense. They've got Zaven Collins and BJ Ojulari coming off the edges. They drafted Max Melton and Elijah Jones in their secondary, two outstanding corners with size and physicality. I thought that was good. They already had Sean Murphy-Bunting. They've got Budda Baker back there, Jalen Thompson. So, the Cardinals are not bad. They're not bad. Defensively, they're still a little bit of a work in progress, but I love some of their young defensive backs. Their defensive front could be challenged. Their offensive line could be challenged, but they got some really good weapons offensively, and Kyler, who's a dynamic player and a pretty strong run game. So I think Arizona's definitely pointing in the right direction. They're an improving team. Now, are they the number one contender in the NFC West to the Niners? I would probably say, despite all their momentum, they're probably not. Let's jump to Seattle. I think Seattle is interesting here. Seattle obviously has John Schneider, who I think is one of the best general managers in the game. They just hired Mike McDonald, the young head coach from the Ravens, the defensive coordinator, as their head coach. And we all saw what McDonald did to the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan on Christmas night. So McDonald is a terrific young coach. He really is. And they need to improve defensively. Their defense was ranked 30th in the NFL last year. So they bring in McDonald. And then you look, why don't we start with what they did on defense? They drafted Byron Murphy in the first round out of Texas, gives them an interior pass rusher to go with Draymond Jones and Jerron Reed and Leonard Williams and Jonathan Hankins. So they added a really good interior rusher in Byron Murphy. You still have Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor. They added Sundiata Anderson and Nelson Caesar coming off the edge. So there's some talent there. At linebacker, they added Terrell Dodson from Buffalo, Jerome Baker from Miami. They have Nishena Nwosu from who comes over from the Chargers. That was a great pickup. So they added Nwosu, Jerome Baker, and Terrell Dodson. You can make an argument that Dodson, Baker, and Nwosu were their team's best tacklers. They're now all on the Seahawks. They also drafted Tyrese Knight out of UTEP. He's a tremendous steal of a draft pick. They have Derek Hall in his second year, a second-round pick out of Auburn coming off the edge, another guy who can rush the passer. So, and then on the back end, you've got Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, Julian Love. They added Rayshawn Jenkins. You've got Michael Jackson there as well. They drafted DJ James out of Auburn. You got Kobe Bryant, the former Thorpe Award winner. They've got some talent. So I think overall their defense is going to be much improved. And then offensively, they're going to run it with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. Geno Smith, I think, will beat out Sam Howell, at least to start. They got Noah Fant at tight end. They just drafted A.J. Barner and Jack Westover. So they got a couple young tight ends that are pretty good. And they've remade their offensive line. I mean, Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas at tackles. They've got Anthony Bradford and Laken Tomlinson at guards, the former Niners, now their left guard. Oluwatimi is their starting center. They've got young receivers in Metcalf, Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Nigba. So, I mean, it's they added Laviska Shenault, gives them kind of a big body as well. I thought Garrett Greenfield and Christian Haynes were a couple nice additions to their offensive line. So, I mean, Seattle is coming. I would say Seattle's coming. Now, you got Geno, and I don't love Geno, and, we'll see. There's a number of new faces on their defense. We're going to have to see if McDonald can get that thing dialed up. But I would say Seattle looks like they might be the number one contender. They might be the number one contender in the division to the 49ers is Seattle. I would say looking at this. Now, let's talk about the Rams for a second. And the big question with Seattle is not only is how good's their defense, can they protect Geno Smith? Last year, Seattle allowed a 40.2 quarterback pressure rate allowed. That was the 8th worst in the NFL. So they got to do a better job at protecting Geno, and they got to build up their defense. But they bring in McDonald. They added some new faces, and I kind of like what they did. So I would kind of lean towards Seattle probably as the number one contender to the 49ers in the NFC. But then there's the Rams, and the Rams are interesting. Les Snead and Sean McVay. These guys are wearing Super Bowl rings. Mike LaFleur is their offensive coordinator. And look at this offense. I mean, the Rams offense, when Puka Nacua, Stafford, and Kyron Williams all played together last year, LA averaged 30 points a game, roughly 30 a game, 28-5 a game. Stafford had 18 touchdowns and 3 picks in those games. So they have as good a weapons as any team in pro football. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua at wide receiver. Are you kidding me? Both those guys have great hands. Tyler Higbee at tight end, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, some sticky-handed tight ends right there. And then Kyron Williams, and they just drafted Blake Corum in the 3rd round out of Michigan, and you're hearing nothing but great things out of Rams camp about Sean McVay's love for Blake Corum. And then you got Stafford, who's still playing at a really high level. So they've really improved their offensive line. They brought in Jonah Jackson. They plugged him in at left guard. Steve Avila is now at center. Avila's a monster. They signed Kevin Dotson away from the Steelers. They drafted Bo Limmer out of Arkansas. I think that's going to be a nice Nice addition for them. So, the Rams really did upgrade their offensive line. They got great offensive weapons, and they got Stafford. Now, their backup quarterback, if Stafford goes down, is Stetson Bennett. So any kind of injury to Stafford, and they're cooked. And then defensively, they've lost Aaron Donald. This is the post Aaron Donald era. But man, in a short amount of time, I think you got to like some of the guys they've added here. Braden Fisk from Florida State, Jared Verse from Florida State. To go with Kobe Turner up front, that's pretty nice right there. Byron Young had a really good year, the second-year linebacker out of Tennessee. But to me, where the Rams are really much improved is the secondary. I mean, they've added Darius Williams, who they used to have, who was in Jacksonville. Now he's back. Cameron Curl's an excellent strong safety from the Commanders. They bring him in. They just brought back John Johnson. They signed Tre'Davious White. He's not the same player that he used to be, but they drafted Cam Kinchins out of Miami. There's some decent players there. Kenny Logan, the undrafted free agent out of Kansas, I think is kind of a little bit of a sleeper. He's a big-time hitter in the secondary. So, I mean, I think the Rams defense is still very much a work in progress, but they're coming. They're coming. They're definitely improved. And with that offense, as long as Stafford stays healthy, I mean, the Rams are going to be a tough team any Sunday you get them, especially if these young DBs start to come together. I mean, yes, it's a projection. You're projecting, production out of Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, Cam Kinchins, Cam Curl, Darius Williams, Tre'Davious White, lots of new faces on their defense. I think that they are a very real team, but I think it's also unreasonable to think that Stafford goes the whole year without getting hurt. And if he gets hurt at all, I don't think they can win any of those games. Stetson Bennett just is not ready to win in this league. Stafford makes the whole thing go. But, man, they can score 30 on you. They can score 30 on you, and if you turn the ball over once or twice, the Rams are going to beat you because they've got a really, really strong running game now. With Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, I think they've got two really strong runners to go with an improved offensive line and as good a receiving core as there pretty much is. So to me, the Rams are coming. I would say if you made me, just because of the youth on the Rams defense, losing Donald, the age of Stafford, they were relatively healthy last year, it seemed like in certain spots. I think I'm going to go with Seattle over the Rams because I think Seattle's a little deeper. I think Seattle's made more additions in the offseason. I think Seattle's a little bit better. But I would say Seattle's the number one contender in the division. The Rams would be a second choice, but really close. And if their young defense comes of age, they could be the number one contender. But I'll go Seattle, then Rams, then Cardinals. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Who is the number one competitor to the Niners inside their division? I think it's the Seattle Seahawks, but what do you think? Tell me below. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.